Zero. One. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Barracks, the podcast where service ends but the story begins. And I'm joined from across the world with Max, adventurer and veteran. How's it going?
Hey Gina, very good, thank you. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, so you've just been showing me around where you're staying, and it's amazing. So we'll have a look probably at that in a minute. So let's jump right in. What was your childhood like? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I was born in South France, near Montpellier. So it's halfway between the Pyrenees and the Alps, like right in the middle. And I was born in a sort of hippie artistic commune. My parents were British, so my mum was Hungarian and my dad was Scottish. And they met in London in the 70s and part of a theatre troupe. Who got a little bit disillusioned and bored of living in the UK, and so they put all their money together, moved to the south of France, found an abandoned castle, turned it into a commune, and I was born in that. And then did most of my schooling in France. So I sort of grew up culturally French, spoke English at home and then French at school. Then moved around a lot. That's the sort of nature of having bohemian parents, I suppose. You're sort of constantly on the go. We were culturally rich but financially quite poor, and so that's kind of like one of the byproducts of following your passion, especially in the arts, for my parents. Then moved to Paris, then from Paris moved to Brussels. My parents separated, so I went to live with my dad in Brussels, where I went to the European School of Brussels, and from there got my baccalaureate there, moved to the UK, went to university in the UK, because I always felt that was a missing part in kind of who I was. You know, I grew up French, but I never really felt French. I always felt caught between two cultures, and I really wanted to experience what it would be like to live in the UK. And I had a calling to do that. And luckily enough, through the school that I went to, you could, well, back in the day, pre-Brexit, it was kind of easy to get go to any university across the whole of Europe at the time. I think it's a little bit more complicated here, but now. And then, yeah, went to university, studied history and French politics. And after that, went straight into work, into marketing. And then traveled around, became a Thai boxer, lived in Thailand for a while. And when I was in Thailand, I met a Royal Marines captain that was in one of the training camps that I was training in. We became really good friends, and he was like, "Well, have you ever considered the military?" And I was like, "Hell no, you know, I come from a hippie family. Like, why would I ever consider joining the army? That's the antithesis of everything I believe in." But then we became really good friends, and weirdly enough, when I came back to the UK after about, I think I was in Thailand for a year, the seed had been planted, and I was kind of intrigued about this thing, and you know, it felt like an interesting thing. And then when I came back to live in Oxford at the time, one of my neighbours was a writer and also an ex-military guy, and he used to be in the same boxing gym as me. And he had been in 29 Commando as a FST commander in the Falklands. And we became really good friends, and then, I don't know, it just felt like serendipity and things started happening. So then I applied to go to Sandhurst, and then, yeah, joined the army, and 14 years later, I'm here. Sorry, that's
Wow.
the sort of snapshot resume.
Yeah, I mean, it explains what you're doing now, definitely.
Right.
But then I guess kids like to rebel against the parents, don't they? So what a difference from going from a hippie commune site
Right.
to joining the army that couldn't be any more regimented. Or
Yeah.
the Royal Marines.
No. So I joined the army. Yeah. I went. Yeah. I joined the army. Yeah. So
it couldn't be any more different, could it? How did
yeah,
that go?
yeah. It was a bit of a shock to the system for my dad at the time. So my mum passed away when I was younger, but yeah, he understood it. I think he understood it because it was, if you want to sort of apply some pop psychology to it, I guess the lack of structure growing up around hippies all the time meant that I felt I needed to find that structure somewhere else, and the army became that. And I think it's the case for a lot of us when we join the military, we're looking for a second family. There's a lot of people dealing with, I think, and I'm broadly generalizing here, but we're all looking for something when we join the military, whether it be camaraderie, adventure, a sense of purpose, a sense of identity. And I think the military offers that abundantly, and that's part of the appeal. And especially if you've come from an unstructured, kind of chaotic life, then I think we all look for that sort of patriarchal figure, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but that structure, and a lot of us seek for it. I mean, that's what I've seen observationally, with the people that I've served with throughout the years, and it becomes your secondary family. And I think there are a lot of people that join the military with existing trauma or psychological issues that are related to their families, and without even knowing it, are drawn to the military because that's the core reason for wanting to join, rather than the bigger, serve your country, yada yada, which I think a lot of us do. Of course we do. There's a sense of patriotism, sometimes nationalism, but deep down at the core psychological level, I think for a lot of people, without sounding a little bit Chad, because you remember that advert, like, belong, but we do kind of want to belong a little bit. But yeah, I think that's why.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It's an interesting way that you've come into it, and I can see where it mirrors other people, definitely. So, what did you end up joining, and how did that go? How was trading
Yeah.
or basic job?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So I'd come back from Thailand. At the time, I had a skinhead, and I used to wear sort of Adidas tracksuit tops, and this is back in the sort of, I guess, early 2000s, like early 2008 or 9 or something like that. Jeans and white trainers, and I went into the recruitment office, and I remember it was in Oxford, and I remember going in and speaking to the bloke there and being like, "Yeah, I want to become an officer," and he kind of looked at me like, "You what?" and I was like, "No, I swear, I've got a degree and I'm educated, etc., etc." And he said, reluctantly, sort of passed me on to the bloke in charge of officer recruitment, and then ended up going to Westbury, did the whole officer selection thing, which is a bit of a shock to the system, but it's fun. And somehow managed to get into Sandhurst after, I don't know, it's pretty fast actually back then. It took about a year to get in, which I know nowadays is very different. It seems that the recruitment process has been drawn out and been
Yeah.
through quite a few iterations and issues with different private companies taking over, whatever. But yeah, so got Sandhurst. I was kind of torn between going infantry or artillery because like I said, my neighbour had been an FST commander in the Falklands and been in 29 Commando, and I was filled with all of his kind of like stories. And but I also hear me?
Yeah, I think
I know.
you're back on.
I just
Back on.
Am I back on? Yeah, sorry, I just
Yeah.
got a call. Um, and Yeah, so went Sandhurst and eventually joined the artillery. I had a terrible time at Sandhurst. I hated it. It was such a shock to the system, and I was a little bit older than the average. I was 27 at the time, and I'd had a job and I'd had a career, and suddenly being thrown in that environment was absolutely brutal. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Of course, hindsight is 2020, and rose tinted spectacles when it comes to the experience. But if I'm honest, at the time I absolutely hated it, and I just many a times thought about just wrapping my tits in and leaving. And I'm happy I didn't. And so in the end I ended up joining the artillery, then went into 29 Commando straight away, so straight after basic or Sandhurst. Um, and then did the commando course, all of that, and then joined 29 and was based in Plymouth for my first 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what would you say was the hardest thing when you were during training at Sandhurst for you personally?
Um, Aside from drill and being the tallest guy in my company and constantly screwing it up and, and drawing a lot of attention to myself that I didn't need. Uh, I think I don't know. I think it's like it's the suddenly you're in a world where I mean it sounds a little bit wet, I guess, when I say it now, but it's just that interactions with your first interactions with your color sergeants and those first few weeks where you're just constantly being berated and you don't really understand that it's a game. It takes a bit of time to understand that it's all a bit of a charade and it's all a bit not charade but
Yeah.
masquerade and that people are in roles, but you don't really see that. You just see that, you take it at face value, and I think it's just I just found it hard to adapt around that. Just the constant negative reinforcement, and I understand that's part of the sort of indoctrination process. And I've been on the other side, and I've been DS on numerous courses thereafter, and you put on that role. But when you're subjected to it, it's very hard to you know tell that apart from who the person is, who that person shouting at you actually is, and that they're just playing their role in a wider piece, which is to develop you into an officer. And so I think that's the bit that I found the hardest, yeah, at the beginning. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. How about
Yeah,
how
and
how
it's
was it
so
for you?
hard, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
well, I was really lucky because I was in the army cadets, so because I
Uh,
knew all the different skills and drills, it was just getting myself fit and
right,
staying out of trouble, really.
right.
But
Yeah.
we had a girl who was it was similar, never done anything, and she was constantly in trouble, and we were always trying to help her. And yeah, and it was just like, oh, bless you, because it's like everything she did just seemed to be wrong. It was like,
Uh-huh.
but eventually she got there. Eventually
Yeah.
she got there.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because like you get people that have been in the reserves. You have, especially at Sanders, you get people that have had prior service as BODs, etc., and they've got so much experience, and so their experience is so different from well, it was from mine. There's guys in my platoon who had done 2 tours of Afghan and just come in and doing officer selection. And some of them, there was a foreign cadet who I've strangely met on this adventure now. This guy called Shotal Skotlatsi from Georgia, and he'd just come back from fighting the Russians. And he'd been war fighting in 2008, and suddenly he's there being taught basic infantry drills by people that have never been in a peer-on-peer conflict, and he's just there like, what is this, And then there's
Yeah.
guys like me who like have never ironed their kit in their life, and suddenly you're just in a
Yeah.
world of absolute hell. So yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting,
Yeah. But
formative for sure.
obviously, well, you got it together, didn't you? Because to pass, all arms commando training means you've got to be pretty shit at all of those skills and drills. So
Yeah, I
that
mean,
must
I
have
guess
made a difference.
it was weird because I kind of I was drawn to go and do the all arms because I was always physically very fit, and that's what saved me,
Mm.
in a lot of circumstances. I guess, that's kind of like you say that writ large for the military. If you're fit, you can always, kind of get by. Um, but that's where I really came into my own. So I did not enjoy Sandhurst at all. But then suddenly being in an environment where I was with actual soldiers and where your leadership role actually meant something. So it wasn't in a competitive situation where, you know, I feel that Sanders, you're commanding your peers, and there's nothing harder than commanding your peers, especially in these competitive environments where everyone's vying for position, and so
Yeah.
your failure is someone else's gain. And so whereas on all arms, it was the first time where suddenly it made sense, where leadership actually made sense to me, because the guys wanted someone to take charge because they're like, well, you're the officer, you're going to do this is naturally what you have to do. And so it kind of all the pieces all started falling in together. And whereas I had a tough time at Sanderson, didn't do particularly well, when I ended up in the All Arms, when it suddenly became more quote unquote real, I did really well, and then I blossomed from then onwards. Or at least I felt like it. I felt far more confident in that environment,
Mm.
than I did, yeah, in at Sandhurst for sure.
Yeah. So what was one of your standout? Because you did 14 years, wasn't it, in the army? What was
That's
one of
right.
your
Yeah.
standout experiences from a leadership aspect, you think?
I mean, it's hard to pinpoint one thing, one particular event, but it is really about the relationships that you build and the trust that you develop with with your teams and the whole team building aspect. And it's when you're out, you don't really realize this as much, how important that was and how valuable it was to be in an environment where everyone to a certain extent was willing to subsume their egos and their personal needs in order to achieve something together. And there's I was trying to explain a few days ago. I was trying to explain to one of my friends what the term jack means, and how that's one of the one of like
Yeah,
the worst things that you can be called, like
yeah,
being called
yeah,
selfish.
yeah,
And but then in the civilian world, it seems that everyone is okay with that selfishness to a certain extent, and I wouldn't call it, we would call it selfishness from the military because we see that as being selfish, but they just see it as,
yeah,
or as a civilian, it's just looking after yourself. And transitioning from that mindset to this new mindset, I find can be quite difficult. But yeah, from a leadership perspective, I mean, it's little things that happen on a day to day where you're just around people. For me, the biggest joy was finding the problem child in a platoon or a company, and then figuring out what the problem was with that person, whatever it may be, financial, emotional, physical, whatever, and having that trust that you can develop with that person to then help them overcome it and transcend all the stigma that would be applied to them. Like, so if someone was injured and suddenly they would get that reputation of like, oh, such and such is a physmong, he never wants to come and he's just doing this to get off exercise. And those labels would stick to certain people. But then when you'd speak to them, they'd obviously be like, well, I just want to get fit and get back in the field and do X, Y, Z. And then building a plan with them and then getting them better and then reintegrating them into the fold. And that happens all the time. And that to me was the most fulfilling bit of the whole experience when I think about it now. Yeah.
yeah. And that's, I guess, as an officer, that's what your ultimate role is, isn't it? To make the team cohesive and make everybody an effective team member.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so. Especially at the sort of lower ranks until you go into like staff work, and then and then things get yeah, then it gets different, and then you're just another
yeah,
cog in the wheel. Yeah,
yeah. Then you're just pushing paperwork, aren't you? I guess.
correct.
So the what you're doing now is a little bit getting back to your roots as a child, I guess, because you've gone back into that nomadic style. So how did that transition start? So you eventually left the military, and then
Hmm.
what happened? Fill me in.
Yeah, so at the time I was the liaison officer for 16 Air Assault Brigade out in France with the French Parachute Brigade. So that was my last posting in the military. And so I'd just been promoted to major, and that was my first kind of job as a major, or my second job as a major, I think. Um, and seemingly everything was going quite well. I mean, it was a great posting, based in the south of France, and I was able to be close to my family because they needed me at the time. But then things started falling apart when I was there, and the wheels started coming off, and I didn't realize it back then, but I was heavily depressed, drinking a lot. I was buying benzodiazepam off the black market and sort of using that to deal with my anxiety. And it started off with taking one every night, and it progressed to the point where I was taking almost 8 a day. And I've got no shame talking about this now because that's what happened, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then little by little, I started losing my sense of self within that and getting more and more depressed to the point where I became suicidal, and it became unbearable. And is it and the catalyzer for that was at one specific day where I'd realized I'd become addicted to painkillers, as in full on addicted. I was taking 9 a day. I was taking a benzodiazepam at 8 o'clock in the morning before putting my uniform on, and somehow managing to do phys and get through the day and sit in this office in France with all these other French officers and working for really interesting people. I mean, I was working for a general who had led the French Foreign Legion into Mali in 2013, and they're great guys, but I was just completely disconnected from it all. And so I knew that I needed to quit because I'd effectively become an addict. And so I decided to go cold turkey one day, which was a really bad idea, but I didn't know that you shouldn't do that. Which led me into a week of no sleep and just completely lost my marbles during that period. And so I put my hand up and just went, look, I need help. Like, I can't keep doing this and managing this alone, which then started the whole medical discharge process, which took a long time, took about a year and a half. And during that process, I started therapy, talk therapy, antidepressants, all that stuff. And one thing that my army psychiatrist at the time asked me to do was, look, you need to take a bit of time off for yourself. Why don't you just go and do something that you enjoy? And, I enjoy travel, I enjoy motorcycling. So I thought, yeah, all right, cool. I'll just go and take my motorbike somewhere. And literally the same day that he said that to me, I went to my local butcher's, who's this Moroccan guy, and he'd just come back from a motorcycle trip in Morocco. And he was like, yeah, I just rode my bike 2 hours down the road, got on a ship and arrived in Morocco. And I was like, Jen, you can do that. And he was like, yeah, yeah. So the next day I just packed my bike and I said to him that I would do it. So then to hold myself accountable. And then I just left to Morocco for 3 weeks. And I'd never traveled that long by myself. And I was doing it whilst I was on antidepressants and everything. And then I realized whilst I was out there that is the best time of my life. Like, and I just suddenly started to feel alive again. And so when I was coming back, and I was crossing the Pyrenees, I almost went AWOL and just went, screw this. I'm just going to ride down to the tip of Africa and never come back. And I just realized that was what I needed to do, and that this sort of light bulb moment, that you see in like sort of cartoons or whatever happened. And I was riding up this mountain. I was like, I'm going to ride my bike around the world. And then that became kind of almost like a lighthouse for me when I was navigating the rest of the medical discharge process, because it gave me something to hang on to that I knew I wanted to do. And it became my sort of obsession and helped me sort of redefine a bit of a purpose as I was losing everything else around me, because I didn't want to get medically discharged, but it was going to happen and I knew it. And little by little, that process just became more and more real. And so I kind of felt, okay, rather than jumping in onto the next thing and, applying for a consultancy job or go and work in the city in London or doing all the stereotypical things that most army officers do, I felt I needed to go and find myself. And so I decided to plan this trip. And that was the idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not the same as you, but I remember going to Australia when I was still serving on my own with a backpack and thinking it was the best thing I'd ever done, because all my life I'd always been told what to do, and where to be, or I had to consider someone else. So is that how it felt for you? Because you rode off for that first time, and the only person you needed to consider for those 3 weeks was yourself.
Right. Exactly. And
And
I
then,
think when you... Yeah, no, go on.
no, I was just thinking, in looking after yourself, you kind of start finding yourself, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. And it's I mean, now when I look back, those 3 weeks seem like nothing. I mean, I've been on the road 20 months now, so but I think, yeah, it forces you into reflective mode, but it also forces you out in the sense that you're then on your own. And if you want social contact, if you want to go and speak to people, you need to be extroverted and you need to go out there and make that effort to meet people. And you'll meet them on your own terms. And you'll meet them kind of like stripped of identity, stripped of all the things that specifically for our community are so important. We tie ourselves into our vocation, into our job, into our uniform, our medals, our accolades, our badges, our cap badge, our regimental identity, etc., and it's far more than any other job. Like, it's not like you take the uniform off and then you're just you. I mean, we are, of course we are, but it really runs deep, and I think that's the beauty of traveling, is that slowly that strips a bit of that away, and then you're confronted with who you are, and then you can start asking yourself questions and start really rebuilding yourself around that. And not to say that you should push that military identity away. I think as veterans we all carry it with us, and it will stay with us throughout. And I think it's a great thing that you can meet a veteran from pretty much any country around the world, and you will have an instant connection with them, because we know what it feels like and we're part of that community forever. But at the same time, when you're out of it, then it's very hard to redefine your identity afterwards, because it runs so deep to the core. And I think that's, for me, for travel, was the reason to try and really strip those layers off, to figure out what it meant to be me without wearing the uniform, Yeah, and I don't know if that was the same for you when you went to Australia or not. I think we all I think the whole veteran community kind of struggles with that a little bit. We don't really talk about it too much, and then what happens is that you have people whose identity is all about being a veteran, and I've seen that as well. There's also a corrosive side to it, which can be, this sort of, and I don't mean this in a bad way, because I feel for people that go through that, and I've been through it as well. But you take on the mantle of victimhood, and that veteran victimhood mentality sets in, and you can have this kind of entitlement, and your whole core, your whole identity is tied into being a veteran, which I don't think is a bad thing necessarily, but it can be, you're just trading one identity for another, and you're not allowing yourself a bit of time to figure out who you are outside of it all. I don't know. It's questions that I'm wrestling with at the minute.
Yeah. It is really interesting, because I know when I left, I just didn't want. I didn't even contemplate myself as a veteran. I'd say I'm ex-military, and I left that world behind, and I didn't really. I don't think I reconnected with that for probably over a decade, because I was just like, that's me. I've done that type thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
some people do. I think maybe if you've been military discharged, sometimes it's harder to disconnect because you didn't want to leave. So I feel for people that way, because they had their choice taken away from them. So maybe that makes it a little bit harder with transition.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, that's a good point. I think, yeah, especially if if you're going to 7-click of your own accord, it's because you've made that decision. You've come to the point where you've had enough of that identity and you're willing to change it. Yeah, that's possibly true. I think there's maybe a little bit of like tiny bit of trauma attached to the fact that you've been ripped apart from your community and trying to refine your tribe. Certainly for me, like, that's now one of the biggest things that I've got on this journey is finding community and identity throughout the journey, and whether that be finding jiu-jitsu clubs in Tajikistan, or ending up in a motorcycle club in Kabul, or whatever, is finding these communities and rebuilding identity behind it.
Yeah. So when you got out, did you have any gap before you just rode off on your motorbike into the sunset, or did you just have a plan and went? What? How did it work out?
Right. So, a couple of things. So as I got out, I went to, and this is a shout out to the guys from the SMRC course, Pete and Duncan, if they ever listen to this, were awesome guys who run a security management consultancy course up north, and I did that as part of my resettlement. And one of the final pieces of coursework that you need to do your qualification is do like this massive risk assessment on a project, and I decided to do it on the journey, which helped me focus on preparing. And so I did this crazy, massive Excel spreadsheet, color-coded, red, orange, green, and all the different risks in all the different countries. And I went full-on sort of planning mode with all the timelines for each country that I'd go in and blah, 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 which obviously none of that survived the first 100 kilometers on the road. You know, uh, I no, there was, to answer your question, no, there was almost no gap. I did my resettlement, handed in my uniform, and then a week after handing in my uniform, I'd packed my flat up, handed my keys in, and I was on the road, and that was it. And so there was literally no time. And so that first, I guess, 6 months to 4 months on the road was pure adrenaline and just joy, and kind of like, I'm out and I'm
Yeah,
into
I'm
the
doing
world,
it.
and yeah, I'm doing it, and I was crunching miles and riding fast, and there was still, I was still on antidepressants, and I think I'd sort of parked all that stuff to one side, and I was like, okay, now I'm in this, and I'm just gonna do this thing, and that was just adrenaline up until I got to India, which took me about 6 months to get to India, through most of Europe, into the Balkans, which was amazing. I'd highly recommend anyone that has. Well, a lot of people in our community have been to the Balkans and have mixed feelings about the place, but despite that, it's still very impressive to go there and see how they're regenerating now, and see the people there, because they're great people. I mean, and then from the Balkans, I went into Greece, spent a bit of time working in a farm in Greece, and then from Greece into Turkey, rode through most of Turkey into Georgia. And then when I got to Georgia, I met up with one of my mates who was in my platoon at Sanders. So this Georgian cadet that I was telling you about before. And the last time I'd
Yeah.
seen him was on the commissioning steps at Sanders, and I promised him that one day I would go meet him in Georgia. So I fulfilled that promise, and he's there. He's been living there. He's out of the military now. He did his similar thing. He did about 16 years, I think. Was pre-service before that, and he is now a bodyguard to one of the main oligarchs in Georgia. And we ended up going mountain climbing, and we crossed into Russia, and we did all sorts of crazy stuff with him and his mates out there, and spent a good month, basically just getting drunk and climbing mountains, and then I crossed into Russia from there after that, which was a really, really strange experience. Quite a stressful one. It felt like Georgia was the last bit of what I felt was like the known world to me. And then stepping out of that was the beginning of the real adventure, where things really started to kick off and the risk became real. And especially at the time when I crossed, which was, I think, 2 days before, no, yeah, so a week before crossing into Russia, there'd been a prisoner swap between the Russians and the Americans and the Brits, which didn't make me feel too easy, because I was like, shit,
Yeah.
ex-British Army officer crossing Russia on a motorbike, that's prime target
Yeah.
for replacing one of the people they traded. And then 2 days before crossing, I was sat on the border in this little village up in the mountains. The Ukrainians had pushed into northern Russia and gone for an offensive up in the north. So I just felt, shit, that timing's really not good on this one. And I travel on my French passport, so that's how I got my Russian visa. But it's still a little bit
Great
naive,
idea.
like, yeah, like, good idea, but that was just to make myself feel better. I mean, if they really wanted to dig into who I was, they could find out in three
Yeah. Yeah.
seconds. And so I did a full social media wipe, and wiped all my presence online before going in. And then going in was kind of, yeah, it was pretty scary, to be honest, pretty intimidating. Like, the border crossing itself is a 12-kilometer tunnel going through the mountains between Georgia and Russia. There's this massive funnel, and people are in there for like up to 2 days, stuck in this tunnel, sleeping in it, and there's fumes coming out everywhere. But with a motorbike, obviously, you can just get through the middle and get to the front. So got through there. I was quite apprehensive of the border, and then when I got to the border, I thought, it's going to be these big burly Russian kind of, GRU types, whatever. and it was all these. Sounds like a cliche, but it was all these like really attractive young Russian women, and I was like, "What is this? Is this some like piss take of James Bond parody or whatever?" You know, like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, welcome to Russia," blah blah blah, big smiles and really disarming. And I was like, "Wow, okay, this is either it's the biggest honey pot trap in the world, or this is just how things are." And it went pretty smooth, up and got through the border in about an hour, and then I was in Russia, and I was in this like false sense of like kind of comfort. I was like, okay, well, this isn't too bad. And I rode in through Chechnya and Dagestan, who everyone had warned me not to go into because of the terrorist threat there, XYZ. But actually, it was the polar opposite. There, the people were so friendly and so kind. And everywhere I stopped, all it took was one salam alaikum, and you'd be invited into someone's house and offered food and hospitality. Um, and then when I crossed out of Dagestan, which is heavily controlled by the Russian military, and I mean it is weird. Like you're riding around Chechnya, and there's posters of Putin everywhere with Kadyrov and these big dudes with big beards and cauliflower ears, and they all look like MMA fighters, and it's a little bit intimidating. But then when I crossed out of Russia, of Dagestan, back into federal Russia, that's where stuff started getting quite hairy, and I got robbed at gunpoint by the police, and all my stuff taken away from me, and then I got followed by the Russian police, and had to kind of escape Russia quite quickly after that. And then it's into Central Asia, and the adventure just got crazier and crazier day by day after that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was so you're now over in America, aren't you? Central America.
Right, in Mexico.
Is it Central America? Yeah.
Yeah.
So so this is probably a girly question. What was your favourite sunset?
Favorite
Or
sunset?
most memorable sunset, yeah. There's got to be one.
God, there's got to be one. Yeah, right. I think it was up in
Everyone's probably
Nepal.
wanting me to ask questions about guns and bullets, but I'm going to go off on a tangent.
Yeah.
Take that
No,
up.
that's great. Yeah. The favorite sunset must have been up in Nepal for sure, up in the mountains in Nepal, watching the sunset over Amadablam Mountains next in the
Oh,
Khumbu Valley.
yeah. Can you see my
No, I can't.
can you
Oh
see that?
yeah, beautiful. Yeah, there
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
Well, it's probably yeah. Oh wow, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
a
mean,
stunning
how
place,
does
isn't
your
it?
heart not stop when you see that, right? Like it's
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
yeah.
It's just. I mean, I want to go back to Nepal. It's got a bit in
Mm-hmm.
my heart, definitely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I served with the Gurkhas as well. So
Oh, you did? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And I think that especially, being British Army out in Nepal, you just the moment you drop that in conversation with someone that's been a Gurkha or has a Gurkha in their family, just all the doors open, and you're welcome in, and you'll just see another side of the culture that maybe other people might not, And I think our
mm,
relationship with the Nepalese is really tightly bound on that level. Yeah, I love it there. I
yeah,
absolutely love it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
When were you there?
Yeah. So, just November. Yeah.
Oh, this
Well,
November.
October, November. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
I
Where did
I
you
led a
go?
group of women up to Base Camp Everest for the end of
Ah,
my
lovely.
charity. So yeah,
Yeah.
finally got there because it was an excuse to spend all that money on a flight. Because obviously you went the more adventurous route, I think. So apart from Russia, what was apart from in Russia, what was probably the most scariest moments? Because I know you've had a few over where you are now. A few
Yeah.
incidents, haven't you?
I mean, Mexico, to be honest, was absolutely fine. I gave myself a bit of a scare entering the country at night when that was a bit of a that was my screw up, bad planning. But essentially, I forgot that my visa was running out in the United States, and I was at my mate's house. We were watching a South Park episode that was taking the piss out of ICE agents and people, being
Yeah.
deported, etc. and we'd eaten some weed gummies because it's legal in California, and suddenly I got really paranoid, and I thought, shit, I thought I had 2 days left on my visa, and I checked my visa, and I had to get out of the country the next day. I was like, fuck. So I had to rush from the border to to the Mexican border and got there at night, and then had to cross the border at night, and then got lost in the Sonoran Mountains, which is basically drug trafficking land. And there's sort of military drones flying overhead and all sorts of stuff, and I was like, oh no, this is not going to end well. And I found some light in a ranch in the middle of, like, literally middle of the mountains, middle of nowhere, and I thought, okay, this is a 50-50. Either it's cartel, either it's just regular people. And it ended up being these Mexican dudes, and they were just there having some beers, and they saw me turn up on the bike, and they're like, what the hell are you doing? They're like, come in, get off the road, don't stay on this road, this is super dangerous. And ended up spending 4 days with these dudes and working on their farm and building stuff and just having the best time ever. And since then nothing's happened in Mexico, but the I think for me one of the scariest moments where I thought this might be Index was in Afghanistan, actually, where it so entered in from the north from into Kunduz, and had been scared by a few people that I'd met in Tajikistan. I'd met some people working in the French embassy that were running the Afghanistan desk, and they gave me a bit of a J2 picture of what it was like now, and they were very dissuasive of going into the north, because basically what's happening, I mean, this is already dated information, but back in a year ago, what was happening is the Pashtuns are exacting revenge onto the Tajiks, and they're burning all the opium fields in the north, jacking up the prices of the opium in the south, obviously, which is creating huge economic imbalance in the country. And now the Tajiks of the north are far more susceptible of being recruited by ISIS-K, and so most of the incidents that are happening in Central Asia from ISIS-K come from Afghan Tajiks. And so it's crazy in our mind to think that the Taliban are fighting a counterinsurgency in their own country, where they're now the security forces fighting an insurgency group, right? So this kind of madness going into that. And so I knew that was a hairy place to be crossing on the bike. And for some reason, so I'd planned to go into Afghanistan on a Thursday, because I didn't want to go there on Friday, obviously, because it's religious day and people are praying and nothing, nothing's going to be open. But the Taliban are pretty conservative, and so they stopped praying on the Thursday afternoon, and so everything was shut. And so I ended up being stuck in no man's land, in a Taliban checkpoint, which was really bizarre, really quite stressful, actually. That whole entering into the country, and then I had to leave the next day, and it took them ages for them to get my paperwork done. So by the time they'd finished my paperwork, it was coming close to night time, and I knew that I had to clear that region. I didn't want to stay in the Kunduz area because of the threats that had been explained to me before. So I had to ride at night, which I really try not to do, like for many reasons. It's dangerous to ride a motorcycle at night, even more so in countries like Afghanistan. But it was that, or staying in the city of Kunduz. And by the time I'd finished my paperwork, there was already 300 people stood outside where I was doing my paperwork, just kind of like just staring at me. So I was like, okay, I'm not, I'm not going to hang out here. So I left and rode through the night, and then I got to a specific checkpoint in the middle of the night, and there's only 2 blokes at the checkpoint. So I thought, okay, easy enough. This should be quick. They took, and most of the checkpoints you go through, they'll pick up your passport. Half of them can't read, so they'll be looking at it upside down, like pretending that they know what they're doing. And I got to this checkpoint thinking that would be the case, and I stopped. And just as I stopped, there's just 2 guys in front of me, and then out of the darkness, there's like 30 blokes appeared. All these big Pashtuns, all heavily armed, big beards, the makeup eyes, and they just surrounded me silently. And I just thought, fuck, like, this is not good. And one of them, I think he was one of the commanders, was kind of like cracking jokes, like, oh, get off the bike, you're going to be a Taliban, you're Mujahideen now, come with us, come and fight in the mountains, blah, blah, blah. And he was kind of laughing, but no one else was. like everyone else was just like straight staring at me, and I thought, fuck. And so I decided that I'd develop rapport with that guy and just and ingratiate him by just keeping him laughing and keeping him engaged. And he had my passport, but I kept sort of scanning around to see what was going on. And I remember there's these two guys at the back, you know, and I remember their faces so well. I mean, like one of them had, he just had this long black beard, and he was tapping his friend on the shoulder and pointing at me and going like this. And I saw that, and I was like, fuck, like I can't break character right now. But I was really shitting myself. And then at one point, I sort of joked around with the commander guy, and at one point, I dropped the mask and I just looked at him and I was like, I put my hand on my passport and I said, "Can I go now, please?" And he kind of looked at me, and I think he got it, and he was like, "Okay," and just waved me off, and I just got out of there and rode another 5 hours until I found a guest house and slept on the floor of this restaurant not before being interrogated by the local Taliban intelligence officer who insisted having dinner with me all night, but it was actually quite nice, and then let me sleep there. So yeah, that was first night in Afghan.
Yeah, that could have gone either way, couldn't it? Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right, yeah, yeah, and I, you know, and I had all these thoughts of like, fuck, you know, I'm gonna be that guy, and now someone
Yeah,
else is gonna have to risk their life to come and get me, and it's more embarrassment than fear at the beginning, and then the fear kicked in
yeah.
afterwards. And I sort of realized, okay, well, that was a lucky escape. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, God, yeah. So Tara then, how's
yeah.
she doing?
She's well. You already know the answer to that question. She's been a little bit difficult the last month or so. She's done well. She's a big bike, and she's obviously British bike. You know, I had to do it on a Triumph. Had to do the whole trip on a Triumph. But she's starting she's starting to have a little bit of wear and tear. And now more frequently than not, I'm having to do a lot of roadside repairing. Yeah, but the engine's good.
Yeah,
Touch wood
she's
for now.
hanging in there.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
what's the where are you now? And what
So
you up to now?
right now I'm in Baja, California, which means Lower California. So if you look at a map of the United States, there's a little peninsula that goes down on the west coast that sort of goes off from from California, from the United States, and then you have Tijuana, and then you have this long peninsula that goes all the way down, and it's absolutely stunning here. It's kind of caught between the Sea of Cortez and the Pacific Ocean. The middle of it is kind of like desert cactus mountains, and it's these huge cacti that are like 7-8 meters tall. Absolutely beautiful. And I've kind of fallen into a bit of a community here where I'm teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I go running in the mountains, and I've just come to a point where I needed a bit of a break, and this seemed like a good place to do it.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you showed me round, and it certainly looks like a stunning place to stop for a bit.
it's
Give the
not bad.
bike a
Yeah,
rest,
yeah,
and give
yeah, yeah.
yourself a rest. Make a bit of money to move on, I guess. And so
Hmm.
when you've you know start getting itchy feet again, what's the next stage of the adventure?
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm uh, I'm wrestling with it a little bit at the minute because it's so I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but I've just come back from a heavy therapeutic retreat up in Tijuana with a clinic that administers ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT for treatment of depression, complex PTSD, TBIs, addictions, etc. And it was offered to me through a American charity that offered for me to go on this thing. And if you're interested in it, there's a really interesting documentary out on Netflix at the minute called In Wars and Waves. And it follows a bunch of Navy SEALs that have been through that exact same clinic. And by sheer luck and with a lot of gratitude towards this organization, managed to get me onto that program. And so I've just come back from it. And And the thing is with those kind of retreats is that they are intense and they force you to confront a lot of stuff. Not in a bad way, but it will show you some stuff that you really need to deal with. And when you come out of it, you need time to reintegrate that experience. And that's kind of what I'm doing now. And part of that is figuring out what the rest of this journey looks like and going away from this sort of like swashbuckling adventure madness to kind of like, okay, my end point is Ushuaia, and which is, that was at the beginning of this journey, was everything was about getting to that destination. And now I'm kind of like, okay, well, that's still kind of the goal, but how do I get there in a way that I don't burn myself out completely doing it and come back with something valuable for myself in the process, right? Because I'll be honest, like at the beginning of this trip, the idea was that I would get there and then I would end my life when I got there because I didn't want to live anymore. And through this process now, and especially after having gone to that clinic, I've changed that. That's gone. And so now I'm like, okay, well, how do I live the rest of my life the best way that I can? And what are the decisions that I need to make to look after myself and my peace, my tranquility, and my well-being? And being on the motorbike all the time isn't the answer, or at least the way that I've been doing it for a while. And so to answer your question, like, yes, eventually I'll head back onto the mainland and go south. And there's some healing communities that I really want to go into, especially in the Amazon, and some tribes out there that I'm really, really keen to spend some time with and do some more healing and more investigating into these medicines, because these medicines that I took in Tijuana in this clinic have changed my life. And prior to that, I went through all the traditional gambit of, medical treatment for mental health, therapy, heavy SSRIs, talk therapy, singing, all of it, like, and none of it worked. And it just kept getting worse and worse. And now suddenly, for the first time in my life, I've actually come to, and this is going to sound a bit strange, but I've come to actually love myself and not wanting to die. And I'm amazed by it. And this is just, the tip of the iceberg of all this stuff that's out there, which isn't spoken about or isn't widely recognized in the healing community in the UK, specifically in the veteran community. And it's changing, but I really want to dig into this a bit more because there's so many of us that would benefit from this, that have been, put on the antidepressant treadmill, go and check in with your therapist once a month. And most of us, I would say, probably deal with it with excessive drinking, excessive fizz, and at the detriment of their health, and sadly leads to really high rates of suicide within our community. And these treatments that are on offer, these traditional medicinal treatments, are life-changing. They're not easy, but for me, it's changed my life and it's changed my whole outlook on everything that I'm doing. And so I want to dig into that. And for me, the journey now is about that and seeing that aspect of it.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Like it's taking you, halfway around the world to discover that actually there's something better and to start healing. Obviously the journey heals you, doesn't it? But then sometimes it's still lacking. And as you say, we do beast ourselves beyond belief, or drink ourselves beyond belief, and that's what the coping mechanisms are in the military, I'd say. I mean, they are changing, and I think maybe you've potentially found your answer, that you need to bring it back to the UK, and that might be your mission.
Yeah,
After
it's
you finish, you're gonna have some amazing times, like in the Amazon. That's gonna be pretty scary.
yeah,
From what I've heard.
yeah. No, there's a few tribes that I want to go and spend some time with that look absolute. I mean, the way that they live and their whole philosophy and approach to life and healing and community, which seems super interesting. I'm, so there's this one substance which is called 5-MeO-DMT, and if listeners and people and yourself are keen to find out about it, like Joe Rogan speaks about it all the time, and there's loads of information about it everywhere. But that is the most life-changing thing that I've ever done. It's called the God molecule, and it basically dissolves your ego and teaches you how to integrate your soul and your ego at the same time. So rather than being enemies, they become friends, and you learn to actually love yourself and have a positive dialogue with yourself, no matter what it is that you feel: guilt, shame, anger, whatever. It all kind of starts softening after that. And when I came out of that process, I opened my eyes, and it was one of the scariest processes I've ever been in. You know, you take this substance, you suddenly lose all bodily control, you fall back into yourself, and you get sucked into this weird vortex. And I was just surrounded by fear and guilt, and I couldn't let go, and I was terrified. For 15 minutes, I thought I was about to die, and I just couldn't breathe, and I was suffocating, and I was dying, and I couldn't let go. And then I opened my eyes, and I came back into this room, and this woman was looking at me, and I was crying, and I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I can do this again, but I know that I have to get to the other side of this fear, because if I don't do this, I'll be trapped in fear for the rest of my life. And so I accepted to take another dose there and then in the moment, and it sent me back exactly where I was before, in the fear bit. And before taking it, I looked at this woman, and I asked her, I was like, am I going to die if I do this? And she looked at me and she said, no, but what needs to die in you will die. And that gave me the confidence to go back in. And then I went into this place of fear and anxiety and self-loathing and not wanting to let go. And I just said to myself, okay, I'm ready. You can kill me now. Just do it. And by letting go, that's the moment, for the first time in my life, that I came into myself, and I realized who I was at my core, and that it was okay for me to love myself and to actually be okay with myself. And it was probably one of the most beautiful days of my life after that. And when I came back,
Yeah, I'm here.
yeah, and when I came back, share this with people at some point or another, you know. And so,
Yeah,
yes, it will become the mission, but I know I've still got a lot of work to do in myself to fix myself before I can actually start helping others, because that's what I really want to do now. You know?
yeah, and yeah, I have heard and read a few things about what I think you're talking about, through Joe Rogan, through different podcasts and documentaries. So it's really interesting, and to hear it firsthand off yourself is quite
Mm-hmm.
powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm glad you're finding your way, not only across the world but to yourself, really.
Yeah,
So is there
thank
anything
you.
we haven't talked about that you want to talk about? We've there's probably so many countries that we could talk about. We'd probably be on it for hours.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, we could probably go on for ages chatting away, but you know, I don't know.
You
I
have to have a
think,
part two.
what's that? Yeah, definitely do a part two from the Amazon.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The internet will be even more sketchy there.
Oh God, yeah. Jesus, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, you know
Wow.
what? Actually, you'd be surprised, like, because in this specific spot, the internet isn't great, but I've like now with Starlink, I found
Yeah.
nomad communities in the mountains of Kyrgyzstan that have Starlink and better connectivity than we have back home. Like it's just,
Yeah.
it's very strange how quickly the world is changing and how interconnected it is. And you can look at it from a positive angle. It's great, you know, information's flowing everywhere, but it also means the world's getting a lot smaller,
Yeah.
and all these remote places that require effort to get to, which is what makes them unique, are
Yeah.
slowly disappearing because of it. And
Yeah. Well, I heard today that they're on about building an airport close to Machu Picchu.
really,
So
yeah, there you go.
so
Yeah,
it would increase, there'd be no effort to get there. It'd just increase the visitors by probably 300%. And
right,
it,
right.
and it's sad. The world's getting smaller, which is a little bit sad because the adventure of
Hmm.
life is getting smaller. you know?
Well, yeah, and it's okay. Like, this is my opinion on these places. You know, places that are borderline inaccessible and difficult to get to. The beauty isn't the place itself; it's the
Mm.
process of getting there. That's the journey. That's the spiritual
Yeah,
growth. That's why these monasteries or these temples are built in these places, because the people that built them understood that to get there, you had to shed part of yourself to get to the top. And I'm sure you experienced that on Everest Base Camp trek, which,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it's a pretty commercial trek, but nonetheless, what an effort it is to get to the top. And then you realize you find stuff out about yourself by going there. And the whole process of climbing a mountain, having a moment of realization at the top, whatever it may be, and then coming back down and processing it. And now it's just become all too easy to jump on a helicopter, take a bus, build a road because it makes commercial sense for that community or that politician or whatever to make a bit more money because it's a great, and you know, and they'll justify it that way. But sadly, it's killing the reason why those places exist, you know, or
yeah,
why they were built and what their purpose is. Their purpose isn't just for, and it's going to sound a bit crass, but, you know, fat lazy tourists to go up there, take a picture, put it on their Instagram, and then,
yeah.
you know, great, you know,
And
no, that's
the
not.
amount of people that were only going one way as well.
Hmm.
Really, you know, on base camp really shocked me that, you know, go there and then they get heli back, and I'm like, well,
Right,
that's cheating.
right,
You
yeah,
can't
yeah,
walk back,
yeah,
surely. But
yeah,
no, it's how it is. I mean, at least they walked there, I guess, but and
yeah,
didn't get a donkey up there. Um,
yeah. But
but
not only
yeah,
that,
it's
like, you know, I mean, my Sherpa mates, so I spent quite a bit of time up there in the Khumbu. I mean, I'd go back in a heartbeat, but like,
mm,
they were saying, you know, they call the helicopters, what they call them, they call them Khumbu Uber, because people just take the piss.
yeah, yeah,
But the flip side to that is that the downdraft of the helicopters creates avalanches, which puts the climbers at risk. So it's
mm,
twofold, right? Like, and yeah, I don't know what the answer is for that, because you certainly don't want to tell communities not to make money and not to be prosperous. But if it
yeah,
comes at the expense of safety and ruins the natural decor, which is the reason why people go there, then it's short-sighted. I think some of these things, some of these projects are really short-sighted because they'll degrade the thing that people are coming to see, you know. And so
yeah,
or they'll make it so exclusive and expensive to visit that no one's ever going to go again. Like Bhutan, for instance. Like, Bhutan costs $150 a day just to walk in the country. Great, they're preserving the, you know, the authenticity and the uniqueness of it, but they're also making it exclusive to go. You know,
mm.
I don't know how you
And
manage that.
that's a bit like, you know, the Amazon. When you go there, it's been so commercialized, and places that were tribes that didn't
Hmm.
have, you know, Western intervention, now, as you say, now have Starlink and a road to
Hmm.
it, and then
Hmm.
now they work for the well, there's an amazing what was it called? There's an amazing project going on with a guy who set it up, and instead of the locals becoming loggers and deforestation, they're becoming the rangers and protecting the
Right.
world
Oh,
of it.
amazing.
And it's such an interesting project. I wish I could remember it. My brain's gone. But yeah, it's something jungle. Jungle
If
rangers or something. Anyway, you'll find out about it. It's
uh-huh.
fascinating how
Yeah,
they're trying to conserve it now, and we need to
yeah,
conserve it, don't we? Because it's the
yeah.
lungs of the world. So
Well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I've so much respect for those guys doing, you know, intense, difficult conservation work across the world. That's something. Yeah, and I think that's a lot of our community and people go into that post-military, right? Like, I think that's something,
yeah,
a good way to redefine your purpose if you're driven to defense and protection. You know, what a great way to protect what we have, you know, than going into, yeah, that kind of line of work. If
yeah.
you have that documentary or
Magazine.
link to that, that would be great. I'd love to actually read
Yeah,
about it.
I'll send it to you after the podcast. But so
Yeah,
we've got final couple of questions because we've been quite
sure.
lucky with the link. And
Yeah.
so who was your ultimate or your role model growing up? Did you have one, even if that's a superhero cartoon?
Uh-huh. So my role model, although I never met him, was my granddad on the English side, and he was he grew up in South London, grew up poor in South London, delivering newspapers. Somehow joined the merchant navy, and then sailed out to China back during, like, you know, in the early sort of 1900s, and then came back, met my grandmother, who was a Hungarian physiotherapist, rescued her from the clutches of Nazi Germany, literally in 1939. He joined the Navy at that point, went AWOL to go and find her, picked her up and brought her back to the UK, and that's how our Hungarian family survived, because the rest of our family didn't. And then was deployed on ship as a radar operator, and he's got some crazy stories. I mean, he was on a ship where his captain was an old school captain, didn't believe that radars worked, and decided that they were going to set sail without a radar. He went against that, went to the Admiralty board on threat of being court-martialed, and as he did that, the ship went off and got sunken. So he's kind of like, for me, and although I never met him, his stories have always been there with me. And this is going to sound really weird. I might get judged for it, but on the retreat that I was on, there was a moment under this substance called Ibogaine where I met all of my ancestors. I literally met them all in my subconscious, and he was there looking down on me. So I guess I did meet him once, but whether that was real or not, I don't know. It felt very real to me. But yeah, he's definitely my role model. Yeah.
Yeah, probably looking after you as well on some of those dodgy places that you're going to.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So finally, the podcast is called Beyond the Barracks. So what does Beyond the Barracks mean to you?
God, that's a good question, isn't it? It's second life. It's how you decide to live it. How you decide to shed that skin and grow a new one. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. It's very fitting for yourself, from what you told us.
Mm. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to you?
No one ever put it back at me. I think it's similar. I think it's when you leave the barracks, you do start a new life, and I think you grow up in a different way, because in the army you're sheltered. Although you go through so many experiences, like war and seeing that, but you're looked after, like, your dentist, your medical, all of that. You get money every month, and when you leave, you've got to learn how to become an adult, to manage your budget, to get your job, to move on and create a new life for yourself, and it is very much a struggle for people, and I don't think it's a bit better now, but I think when sometimes quite hard for people to make that adjustment.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
like a snake shedding its skin, it hurts. Like, it hurts, that process, that process that you go through, that regenerative process. Like, it isn't easy at all. And all those little things that you take for granted are gone, and someone said to me once, and I'll always remember this, that ultimately when you're in the army or in the military, you have the ultimate freedom, because you don't make choices. The choices are made for you, and that's a huge burden taken off from you, because it's like, well, you make small decisions. Will I go this posting, or will I go left or right? But the real choices aren't there, of identity, purpose, life, and then when you're out, I think that's what the hardest bit is. Like, suddenly, I had this in Montana a few months ago. I got to a crossroads. It's left, right, straight, and I just froze. And I didn't know what to do anymore. I was like, I could go anywhere I want, and I don't know how to manage this.
Yeah.
I think that's it's that freedom. It's learning what to do with yourself with all that freedom, which can be overwhelming at times.
Yeah, finding your path. Well, it's been absolutely amazing. been lucky that the internet's held, and I can't wait to see the rest of your travels, and then hopefully one day meet you back here in old Blighty.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
and
thank you so
now
much
you're
for having
gonna
me,
go
Gina.
and watch those whales and sharks and whatever you've got on your back garden. Absolutely amazing. Thanks so much for
No,
joining
thank you.
me. It's been brilliant.
No, thank you, Gina. That was